While Americans are still struggling with high interest rates, preventing them from affording housing, and inflation still festers, it seems as though that the Republican Party is hell-bent on continuing all its efforts on culture war as performance arts and defending Don the Con at all cost. Welcome to another episode of Cypher Report, where we bring you the tools, information, and analysis you need in order to decrypt the world. Let's start off first with the anti-trans bill. So Representative Greg Steube and Senator Tommy Tuberville, the guy that was responsible for holding up every single nomination to the armed forces, all because the military decided to pay for travel for needed abortion services. Yeah, that guy. Both introduced a bicameral bill that would have blocked biological men from participating in any U.S. Olympic Committee event intended for women. The Protection of Women in Olympic and Amateur Sports Act would prohibit any governing body recognized by the U.S. Olympic Committee or USOC from allowing biological men to participate in any female athletic event. The bill defines a female as, quote, an individual who has, had, or will have, or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization. The bill defines a male as, quote, an individual who has, had, or will have, or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes sperm for fertilization. We need to point out here that this language comes directly out of the Heritage Foundation's Defining Sex Act. They're not just talking about sex, but they're talking about gender because they don't see a difference between the two. They are trying to sprinkle this kind of language in any bill dealing with trans people in general, whether it's athletes or anything else, women's spaces, etc. And they're doing this for ideological reasons, and it's coming out of a very ideological group, the Heritage Foundation, which we will report more on in the future. But let's continue on. The bill would also, quote, prohibits a person whose sex is male from participating in an amateur athletic competition that is designed for females, women, or girls. Steube told Fox News Digital, quote, Congress should not have to take legislative action to prevent biological men from hitting women for championship titles. Due to the illogical USA Boxing transgender policy, I introduced legislation to prevent organizations who choose to live in delusion from being recognized by the U.S. Olympic Committee. We must combat the erasure of women's sports by standing for truth, reality, safety, and fairness. Wow, that's a lot of benevolent sexism right there. Continuing on, though. Tuberville, a Republican from Alabama, introduced a companion bill in the Senate on Thursday. Quote, it is deeply disturbing to see USA Boxing change its policy to allow men to box against women. Men should not be competing in women's sports at any level, and especially not in a sport like boxing. Whether in Little League or the Olympics, it's unsafe, it's unfair, and it's just plain wrong. This bill will ensure the Olympics are fair to American women who train their whole lives to represent our country on the world stage. Right, that's what really it's about. You really care about women's sports. A thing that we know for damn sure you wouldn't have bothered to even approve funding for had you been around in the Congress in the 70s. Yeah, you really care about women's sports. This isn't about enforcing your ideology on everybody else. I thought Republicans were supposed to care about freedom and keeping the government out of the personal lives of people. Funny how that works, isn't it? Now, the bill is in response to USA Boxing's new policy, which states that both transgender men and women are allowed to compete in the biological divisions. The requirements to compete in each category include the following: a declaration by the athlete that their gender is either male or female and that they have completed gender surgery accordingly. That is a fairly high bar. It means that they have to take hormones, they have to probably get bottom or top surgery depending on the sex at birth, and other things. It also includes that the athlete in question complete quarterly hormone testing for a minimum of 4 years post-surgery. In other words, they cannot just jump into the boxing ring and start competing against cis men or women, depending on the case, without undergoing a comprehensive testing regimen that would test their levels for hormones and other biological differences that would be tamped down through this surgery and intervention. Additionally, specifically for transgender women athletes, the athlete must demonstrate testosterone levels below a set amount for at least 48 months prior to the first competition. Again, this is a pretty high bar. It requires the testing to be extensive and demonstrate that the range of hormones is either within some sort of nominal level that exists between top athletes, or at least to a level that the USA Boxing feels does not offer an extremely unfair advantage that one would suspect between a cis man and a cis woman. And for transgender men specifically, testosterone levels must be maintained at a level above a set amount throughout the period of the competitor's eligibility to compete in the male category. Again, requiring extensively testing a fairly high bar that would show that the range is within, some tolerable range, some normal range that wouldn't confer a inherent disadvantage for the competitor. This is actually fairly good standards that the USA Boxing is introducing, and it doesn't really seem to be something that people should be really that concerned about. Absent ideological reasons, of course. For its part, USA Boxing is the latest sports organization to make allowances for transgender competitors to compete in the gender division they identify with. Now, again, as I just said, the testing is extensive. It requires years. The idea that a bunch of men that can't compete in women or can't compete in their gender division are just going to jump in and start beating on women.
It's sad to see this. And if one of these young girls or girls gets hurt in this boxing, which is going to happen, I hope somebody gets the pantsuit off of them.
Is just absurd with everything that I just laid out here. But we also know that, for a lot of people, a man just doesn't hit a woman. There's also the fact that a lot of people are going to be like, well, isn't this lying? It's not, but there's where it is. So what are we actually dealing with here? Are we dealing with some unfair advantage and trying to protect the sanctity of sport? Or are we dealing with benevolent sexism, ideology, and religion, all culminating in Republicans' insistence on interfering with the freedom of Americans to do as well as what they want? My friends, it should be obvious that it is the ideology that is pushing this, and it is anti-freedom for Republicans to continue on this. Remember, at the end of the day, when Republicans say they want to keep government out of your business, they don't want to keep government out of your business. They want to keep government out of the businesses that they have. They want the government all up in your shit for things that they don't agree with. And that is what we're seeing here. Again, political theater above substance. And there's more of it that we're going to talk about here shortly. Let's go ahead and get into it. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan and Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis have traded pointed correspondence for months. The Ohio Republican kept making dubious requests for information, and the Georgia prosecutor kept telling him to pound sand. Now it looks like that the hard-right congressman has decided to take matters to the next level. According to NBC News, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan has subpoenaed District Attorney Fannie Willis of Fulton County, Georgia, demanding documents from her office. This demand followed allegation that Willis fired a whistleblower who tried to stop a top campaign aide from misusing federal funds. In a letter last week, Jordan says Willis has failed to comply with 2 earlier requests for documents related to her office use of federal grant money. At face value, that is really true. Willis really has failed to comply with his earlier request. The problem is that his request largely deserved to be ignored. After Willis indicted Donald Trump and a number of associates,
today, based on information developed by that investigation, a Fulton County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment, charging 19 individuals with violations of Georgia law arising from a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in this state.
In August, Jordan does what he always does. He launched an investigation into the investigation. Jordan didn't just express dubious concerns to Willis, he directed the local prosecutor to hand over a series of documents and related information. Instead of throwing Jordan's letter into the trash, the Georgia district acknowledged the chairman's initial deadline with a letter of her own. In it, she told Jim Jordan that the correspondence included, quote, inaccurate information and misleading statements. End quote. As part of an effort the district attorney categorized as improper interference in an ongoing criminal investigation. Willis went on to tell the Judiciary Committee chairman, quote, your letter makes clear that you lack a basic understanding of the law, its practice, and the ethical obligations of attorneys generally and prosecutors specifically, end quote. This in turn led to more pushback from Jordan, who sent another letter in September complaining about Willis's hostile response, and he demanded she provide him with alleged documents that he thinks might exist. Once again, Willis tried to set the record straight. In her letter, she responded, quote, we have already written a letter, which I have attached again for you, explaining why the legal positions you advance are meritless. Nothing you've said in your last letter changes that fact. She's not holding any punches, guys. She's going right after his credibility. And it's something that is absolutely 100% necessary because Jim Jordan is an ideological hack and always has been. And this is how you deal with ideological hacks. You put them in their place. But let's continue on. It's against this backdrop that Jordan responded to Willis's latest letter with a subpoena. Initially, Jordan promoted a conspiracy between federal law enforcement officials who were secretly helping to orchestrate anti-Trump prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions. However, after finding no evidence that that was happening whatsoever, because of course he didn't, Jordan now has come to believe that Willis might have misused federal funds and fired a whistleblower. If you can't get them on one thing, you gotta try to get them on another, because what are they going to do at the end of the day? They're going to do everything they can in order to try to protect Trump because he's their daddy or something. But what makes this so funny is that the House Judiciary Committee doesn't actually have jurisdiction to insert itself into criminal prosecutions at the state level. As such, Willis responded to the subpoena in a letter on Friday saying, quote, these false allegations are included in baseless litigation filed by a holdover employee from the prior administration who was terminated for cause. The courts that have ruled found no merit in these claims. We expect the same result in a pending litigation. We are proud of our grant program and our partnership with the Department of Justice that makes Fulton County a safer, more just place. End quote. So my friends, what does this mean? Well, as we just said, it seems that Jim Jordan is bent on trying to protect Trump at all cost. Nothing is beyond his scope in trying to interfere with the Georgia prosecution of Trump and his associates for their scheme in order to try to turn over the 2020 election. Viewers of this show and broadly news generally, but we did a good job of covering it as well, will know that there is a lot of evidence that is against Trump and his associates. In fact, there have already been 4 guilty pleas entered in the GA case against Trump and his associates for trying to overturn the 2020 election, which all stem back to Raffensperger's call with Trump, where Trump tried to get him to find more votes that weren't there. As we've just explained in this episode, Republicans are dead set on defending Trump at all costs, even to their reputation and integrity, as well as providing any number of culture war red meat options to their base in order to keep them energized and to vote for Trump into the 2024 election. We will continue to monitor this information in order to give you the proper information and context to understand why the Republican Party continues to give its base red meat in the culture war and defend Trump at all costs. So be sure to tune into Cypher Report next time to get the news, information, and analysis that you need in order to decrypt the world.